Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. Today we have Brendan Boyd, who is an incredible podcast king. I've been friends with you, Brendan, for over the last year, and I love your game. I love the plays, and I love how you help people create six figures, multiple six figures, seven figures through podcasting. So you are a digital media entrepreneur. You have game, you got it going on, and you help people get on podcasts and grow their audience. And
Yeah.
I'm really happy you're here. So tell us, how did you what's your number one tip to help people monetize their podcast?
Well, before we even get into that, we gotta let people know the truth. Do you mind if I let them know the truth real quick?
Please.
All right. So Amanda, how amazing she is. I met Amanda through what I like to call a podcast funnel, right? And we met through the podcast funnel where I had one of my assistants set up a podcast. She didn't know what was going on. She didn't know it was her, but it's a strategy that you guys can 100% use. But before I even tell you about the strategy, how we met is she went through the funnel, she had the podcast, and then at the end of the podcast, she was pitched with a product and 100% caught by surprise. But the thing about it was the podcast host, or not even the host, but the salesperson who she was talking to, he had a different type of energy. So it didn't really mix. But what came out of that was an amazing piece of vertical content, short form content, while you were on a ski lift, which actually was pretty funny. And I would have probably did the same thing. I thought, then that's really how you make content. You make authentic content out of a moment and you turn that experience to content and then create a lot of engagement. And then fast forward, here we are on your podcast, and we've been friends since then.
It's so good. Exactly. I love it. So tell us about a podcast funnel, because this is a pretty smooth move.
Yeah. So I don't want to say I developed it, but I feel like I did. But I'm pretty sure like things are pretty much remixed under the sun. But I didn't see no one doing this as I implemented. So essentially, if you sell high ticket or if you sell anything, you want calls. You want sales calls, you want to speak to clients, you want prospects. But if you're so emboldened to just say, hey, listen, I can help you, want to get on a call, most people are going to say no, because their initial instinct is to say, I don't need your help, get out of here, get out, just leave me alone. Even though they might need your help, actually, just our human instincts is we don't want to be bothered.
Right.
But that same person, if you literally goes up to the same person, you say, hey, listen, I love what you got going on. I would love for you to come on my podcast to talk about who you are, your story, how you provide value, and whatever else you have going on. They are going to say yes. 97% of the time, you will get a yes.
Right.
So then what you do is you do that, right? You turn that into a podcast, right? So sales call, discovery call, whatever, brand it into a podcast, which actually gives you way more value because you're recording it with the intention to put it out. So that prospect gets what they want, and they get what they want in a bonus, which is the content, which is a podcast. You get what you want because you actually have a real conversation with someone that's definitely going to show up, and you have the content for after that if you want to redistribute that or turn that into short form content. But as you're asking the person what they have going on and you're giving this platform, you're kind of strategic with maybe, let's say, 1 to 3 questions that you're going to ask them that actually allows them to give you more information for what you may see, if they may qualify for what you have. And then since you build up the know, like, trust in 30 minutes plus minus, you simply transition that into an additional call, right? And you can let them know, hey, I heard everything you have going on. And I kind of see some areas where I can help. Would you like to learn how I can add more value to you? And then that way you leverage that discovery call, which is a podcast, into absolutely fuego client that more than likely will close.
Right.
Then you do more sales. Now, the amazing thing is this: you can actually accelerate that process if you have a form and automations and calendar. You can just send them a link. They can register themselves and hop on the calendar. And then you can accelerate it 5x, 10x when you replace yourself and add a podcast host.
Yes.
To actually do the stuff for you. And then these conversations are happening, these podcasts are happening, and you're not even involved, which is amazing.
And you are also positioning yourself as an authority Like,
super
Brendan's
authority.
so busy but he could help you. Okay, I love this.
Exactly. Yep. And then you can actually have some, I call them like supplementary offers, right? So the supplementary offer one could be, well, yeah, this podcast was amazing. If you actually want to be interviewed by the man or by the woman themselves, XYZ price point. You can have something like that. You can have something like, well, this podcast was great. If you want access to the actual files from this, then you can sell that for XYZ price. Because the podcast is going up, but maybe they want reels, maybe they want a commercial, maybe they want a couple other things.
Mm-hmm.
And you can have supplementary offers that are not even have anything to do with why they're on the podcast for your main offer,
Mm-hmm.
and they can buy everything or they can buy one of the things. You can't really lose. And the number one thing that people miss out on, regardless if anyone buys or doesn't buy anything, you have a relationship, which is probably the most important thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, look at our relationship, because then I've sent friends to you to work with you. And exactly. So the relationship is gold. I love
Yes.
it. Okay. So podcast funnel, basically this is a souped up way to get ideal clients in the relationship, and then you can monetize it. And
100%.
okay, I love it. So where do people find, let's say I have a bunch of clients right now, I'm thinking, and they would love to do this, but where do they find these audience members or these podcast guests?
That's a
Like, do you have a
really great
strategy
question.
for that?
That's a really great question. Honestly, here's a cheat code.
Okay.
Find a podcast or two or three that is in your space that maybe have some guests that you actually like, that you wouldn't mind talking to. And if you find that podcast or two or three, you can literally go through the episodes and get the contact information for the guests. Because 9 times out of 10, they're gonna have, some type of Instagram or website or something that's gonna, direct back to the guest. And you can actually hire a VA to do this work for you. Go through all the episodes, get all the guest information, contact information, whatever, and then you can start reaching out to them. That's a great way to do it, because you got to look at it like this. If the guest is on a show, one, that means they probably want to go on more shows.
Yep.
And then if they're in a show in that particular space, then they have that interest of what that space is. So it's a win-win. And then when you have that conversation, hey, Amanda, I saw you on Myron's podcast. Now Amanda has a point of a relationship with you, and it's a softer introduction. It's not just like a cold call. It's more like a warm call, right? Because now Amanda's thinking, wow, this guy, Brendan, he watched my podcast with Myron, or this guy knows a little bit more about me. So, so her defenses are down. She might still have them up a little bit, but at least you can get over the fence. You can get over the fence.
Good.
Yeah.
That's how it worked. You found me on Myron's. You guys got over the fence. And then I went through this exact podcast funnel, and I didn't know I was in a funnel.
Yeah, no one knows. It's a secret.
It is. It is so what is your success rate? Because it didn't like necessarily, it didn't happen for me yet.
Yeah.
But what is your success rate generally?
The success rate is like 65%.
Okay, that's big.
Yeah. And if you look at, it's probably even higher if you look at conversions after that, because I'll give you an example. Did Amanda close with one of our offers with that? No. However, we still made some money together. So that means it still worked, and we have a relationship. So it still worked. Think about, maybe it's not the main offer, but the success of the success of what happens after. That 65% is probably like 75, 80%.
That's huge. Okay, that's cool. This podcast funnel. And then, so you want to have a product suite. Sounds like you need to do your research, but then you have a product suite, what to offer them at the end. And then
you definitely want to have your main offer, but I would probably definitely suggest that you have some supplementary offers as well, some like lower ticket supplementary offers.
That is so cool. I never thought about selling the actual video to the person and the file so that they can reuse it for their content. What would be a price point for that?
Oh, listen, let me give you I'm gonna give you a real example.
Okay.
So I'm on a podcast yesterday, and I'm going through how to monetize. We're talking about everything. So I happen to be podcast one of this podcast client's full day, he has 3 back-to-back. So one after me and then another one after that. So I talk about one of the foundational 4, which is what you identified as the content, right? Which I like to call the VIP package. It's also kind of known as the content folder, right? So I said to this gentleman, I said, hey, listen, I just kind of broke down how you could do it or what's included in it. Why don't you just give, he didn't have an offer. Why don't you just give the offer to podcast 2 and podcast 3 right after me? So, you know, I drive back from San Diego to LA. I give him a follow-up text later on. And I'm like, hey, did you happen to just give the offer? He said, yes, he gave it to both of them. So we had a 50% success rate. One person bought at $500. So from a podcast that he was going to do anyway, with an offer that he didn't even have, and the money that he spent to do the studio, he probably recouped a good amount of his investment that day, and he made $500.
That is cool. So it was a live in-person podcast in his studio.
Yeah, live in person. Mm-hmm.
Makes sense. And then he gave them the assets for $500.
Yep. So basically, an asset mix could be any of the following. You can give them access to the raw stuff if you want. You can give them access to the edited final video and audio. You can give them, 6 to 10 clips that are, edited. You can shoot a commercial for their product and service and implement that inside of the episode. You can say, hey, I'll do an email blast, text message blast in front of my XYZ audience. You can even take it a step further and be like, hey, listen, I go live a couple times a week. Here's an additional slot that you can get in front of my people. So you could do something. It could be any of the mix. And then you could literally sell it for anywhere from like on a low 250 to a high, probably 1,000 or more. This
is why I've kept this relationship, because you have so much game. That is so good.
And guess what? You were shooting the content anyway.
Right.
And you probably weren't going to do anything with it.
Right, exactly. I mean, get some mileage out of this. That is, give me an amen in the comments if you guys are loving what he's sharing. He is the podcast king for a reason. Amen. Okay, well, we're just getting started. So how do we grow our podcast and get it to, is that the whole point, to get this puppy grown massively, or is it just to build a relationship, the know, like, and trust, and sell our assets? How do we grow?
So I personally specialize in monetizing your podcast without brand deals, sponsorships, and having a large audience, right? Because if your goal is to be in a space to make money, which a lot of people's goal is, you need to be able to do that as fast as possible. However, that doesn't tackle the question you just asked, because if you want to grow your show, that's a whole different thing, right? So these are some strategies that I think can help somebody grow their show. Number one, you have to have what I could like to call the 4P, as in Paul, strategy. You need a 4P strategy, a 4P plan. That's your post podcast promo plan. What are the 4 to 10 plus things that you do every time a podcast releases? Right? Are you doing an email blast, a text message blast? Are you going live with the guest? Are you tweeting? Are you tweeting it out? Does it post on LinkedIn? Does it go on YouTube? Do you have a text community? Are there any groups that you're a part of? Are you making supplemental content and driving people to the link? Are you creating stories? Are you going on other people's podcasts that week to promote the episode? Like, what are the stuff that you're doing? Are you creating some additional content with the guests, and then you're tagging the guests to bring more awareness on the episode? Do you have a rollout a day or 48 hours before the episode comes out? Like, what is your 4P plan? So that would be something that is super important. And then the second thing I would say is the podcaster has to also be a guest. If you just host a show, you're not going to be discovered, because who the hell knows that you got a show?
Right.
Right. But if you go on other shows, it's easier for people to find you and discover that you have a podcast, because they're on podcasts. So why don't you go on shows so you can be discovered too?
Yeah. And that's what you really help people with. You help people
100%,
go on shows and
100%.
be
Yeah.
right. I love this. So have your own. Now, do you recommend people they have their own, or do you recommend that they go be a guest?
Well, I kind of recommend both. If your strategy or your goal is to be more known, I would say just be a professional guest. If your strategy is to build healthy relationships, I would say be a podcaster.
Got it.
Because my whole life leveled up and changed when I decided to interview people. And it wasn't even a podcast to me at that point. It was just me being able to provide some value and have a conversation. It evolved into what became a podcast for me personally later after the fact. I probably did like 50, 60 shows before I was like, oh, wait a minute, this is a podcast. Like, it just was like, psh, like a little.
50 or 60.
But yeah, so if you want to build solid relationships, I would say, in networking and all that stuff, I would say have the show. But if your thing is to get exposure and be well known, then I would say be a guest. And ultimately, you can work both of them interchangeably or in tandem.
That works. And then, so if they are a guest and maybe they haven't been a guest before, what are some key strategies, or how can they best prepare to be a guest and help them win at that?
Well, Amanda, I hope they're paying attention, because what I would like to say is they shouldn't even go on a podcast if you don't have a call to action.
Right.
If you don't have no value to really, truly give, don't waste your time.
Right.
So I feel like every guest, you need either a back-end strategy or at least a way to collect the data. Right? If you're not collecting name, numbers, emails, if you're not transforming the actual viewers and listeners into name, number, email, into data points, you're wasting your time. Right. So I would say, yeah, you definitely need to do that.
I agree. So that would be download or get this freebie or something that they're getting onto your email list. Okay, so that's the best thing, giving value, having a call to action. So do you think it's better for podcasters to be in person or virtual?
No, I think that if you want to just get it going, you need to get it going virtually, because there's no real barrier of entry. You can start off with Zoom. It doesn't cost anything. Zoom has a free account. You don't need any lights. You don't need a mic. You don't necessarily need a headphone. You could just start with your phone. Okay. And I would probably start there and just do it enough so, decide if you like it or not.
Right.
Because it doesn't make sense you buy heavy equipment and you invest in all this stuff, spend all this money, do 10 episodes and decide like this is work you don't want to do. So I would start with a virtual show. It's very cost effective.
I agree. And then what about naming your podcast? What do you think? What's a best way to name a podcast?
Well, my podcast isn't named the best way because after learning from some people that obviously know more than me, because you always need to be tapped into a source, what she shared with me, her name is Halatala, what she shared with me made sense. And she says the best.
Side note, I met her in Puerto Rico, laying on the veranda on the sunshades, and I met her. It was amazing. We were right there next to each other in Puerto Rico. Okay, she's awesome.
No, she's dope. She's dope. So she says, and I was like, yo, this makes so much sense. Name your show so it's SEO rich, so it can be searchable. So I had a client whose name of his show was Attractive Mindset, but he spelled it not the way you spell attractive. So no one can find his show. But everyone can find his show if he changed it to the correct spelling of attractive. So he changed it to the correct spelling of attractive, and then the show became more searchable. So when thinking about a podcast name, think about words that are SEO rich, words that can be easily searchable and findable. And then that way your podcast will come up by default.
Cool. All right. So what kind of team? Okay, let's say someone's starting a podcast and they're also a guest. What kind of team do they need to help them roll out their 4P strategy?
Yeah, so I think probably the number one thing that you need is you need editors. So I personally don't recommend that if your podcast podcast host that you actually spend time editing your own show. I feel like it's a waste of time.
Agreed.
So I think put some money aside. You can go to Fiverr, couple of dollars, nothing crazy. You can probably get the episodes edited for like, let's say $50 to $250, depending on how much, how you want the content to be broken up and the level of like style of editing and stuff like that. Saves you a lot of time because you might be on a podcast for 30 minutes, but then editing might take you 2 hours.
Forget about it.
You're not making no money editing. You know what I'm saying? No. Unless you're just gonna do a show that's just raw and you're just trimming the front and then trimming the end. But if you want clips, you want this, you want that, you want animations, you want subtitles and all that stuff, like just hire somebody to do it that likes editing, because you get to pay them, you get your time back, they're happy, and you're happy. So I think editors will be number one. After you start getting more momentum, then I would probably hire like a podcast assistant or like a manager for your show that can do the booking, do the scheduling, do the research, make sure things are posted, all the stuff like that. I think those are probably the two most important hires.
That's huge. And in terms of a podcast manager, what kind of salary do you give a podcast manager?
That's a good question. Again, you can find a VA to probably do it. So, anywhere from $5 to $20 an hour. Okay. Again, depending on if you want them overseas, do you want them domestic? Do you want them to take over everything? And I think all you really need is part-time. So probably anywhere from like 4 to 10 hours a week is probably enough.
That works. All right. And then do you use any AI tools for your editing or producing?
No, the only AI tool I use right now helps with captions and descriptions. So I use Buzzsprout, which is a podcast host. And, that gets your podcast on the audio platforms. But it also has an AI component where it would help you write off all the descriptions, create the show notes, and things like that. So I use that. I also use ChatGPT when I'm cross researching like titles for the show.
You called that Buzzsprout?
Buzz, like zzz.
Oh, Buzz. Yeah. Okay, that's good. And then, okay, so how often do you think a person should host a podcast? Weekly, twice a week, 3 times a week? What?
Again, I think it depends on how much you want to level up. I think your show should come out probably once a week, but you can shoot as many as you want. And if you have that VIP offer and you give that VIP offer, you shoot 10 podcasts in a month. That means that's 10 opportunities for you to make $500.
Yes.
Right. So let's say that's $5,000, right? So
monetize.
if you got a 50% conversion rate just for shooting podcasts that you was gonna do anyway, you just made $2,500.
That is so easy. Okay. Now, what are the biggest mistakes people make when doing either podcast guesting and being a podcast host?
I think big mistakes that you make being a podcast guest is, one, probably not having a call to action. 2, not reusing the content, and then not building off the relationship with the host.
Right.
Yeah, I think those are big fails, right there.
How can people build the relationship with the host?
That's a great question. So, I got what I like to call the podcast asset sheet. So this is a sheet that I give my clients so they know how to maximize like the opportunities when you're at a studio or if you're doing a virtual podcast, stuff like that. But I think one of the best ways for you to build a relationship with the host is, reciprocity. Like what can you give them? Do some research. What do they like? Maybe bring them a little gift. Most podcasters don't know how to monetize, so bring an opportunity for them to make some money.
Mm-hmm.
Figure out a way that they can collaborate. Figure out things that they need help with, and maybe you can fill that gap. Maybe you can actually help them, or you could be the middle person to that person, place, or thing that they need that can help them out. You just really build a relationship. And the second thing I would say is, 2 or 3 things I would say after that would be, get that address, send them a letter. Hey, thank you for having me on a podcast. I'll have you stand out, for sure. And then, have them come on your podcast if you have one, or invite them to do a live with you. Because then you build out that relationship, and then they come on your platform too.
That's good. And that's great. Those are really good mistakes. So you are very prolific with your social media content. I love it.
Thank you.
I follow you on all the places. Do you have a game plan, like a daily plan for production?
I don't have a daily plan for production. We probably produce once a week, sometimes twice if I just feeling like, oh, I need to do this, but definitely once a week. We have a plan for the rollout though. So we post 7 pieces of content a day on all platforms. They go up, a couple of hours, apart from each other. Then we have one overnight post. So we got 6 primary posts, one overnight post. Overnight post is going to be a mix of low ticket offers or any of our main offers or something like that. But right now we're actually changing the style of content that we will be releasing on a daily basis.
Why?
Because we've been running with this current style for a while, so I'm gonna mix up the value with the type of content I'm releasing. So you're still gonna get value, but it's probably gonna be a little bit more like showing and breaking down of how something has happened.
Oh,
Like
okay.
for instance,
Yes.
like the same client that made $500 in a couple of minutes. Like I would probably make some content and then break that down, and then show people how they could do it too, type of thing, and then show them the result.
So you're giving value and teaching them what to do. You're teaching
So
people
it'd be
what
a
to
little
do,
bit more
not
like
just,
that. Yeah, not just saying, hey, this is what happened and whatever, or just content that's valuable from like a clip from a show, which we'll continue to do, but we're just gonna give a little bit more value from a different lens, because I feel like that could be even more successful and impactful.
that is because those are juicy gems that will be shared. So when
Yeah.
you do your play, does your team draft everything first and then it's all set up? How far in advance do you set up your 6 or 7 posts a day?
They're
Are
probably
you
set
doing
up
it in
for
real time?
they're probably set up about 48 hours. 48 hours,
Okay.
yeah, before.
And how many people do you have on your production team?
Social media team is 2 people.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
good.
And then the editors. The editors I don't count as the editors are in their own category. But just like social strategy is 2 people.
2 people. And what is
Yeah.
their job description?
Just social media managers.
Okay. Social
Yeah.
media. Okay. Talking about social media, you've talked to me about shout out pages. I got
Yeah.
invited to do a shout out page for a golden retriever. And I was like, Brandon, should I do this? And you're like, no, obviously not. But tell people how, because you can get major influence by doing shout out pages. But I bet our audience doesn't even know what a shout out page is. Can you explain that and tell the benefits?
Yeah. So a shout out page, the best way I can describe it is like a shout out page is like, let's say like the news. So everyone's aware of like CNN, Fox, ABC, and NBC, ESPN, whatever. So these are different pages or platforms that exist within social media. So you might be talking about like wealth, millionaire mentor, buy a black business. Those are just 3 as an example. All of those channels, all they do is provide information and they create a platform to give out information or different posts. So that means they typically have an audience built in of 6 figures, sometimes 7 figures. So if you get your content in front of these audiences that's already tapped into this content, they're going to be aware of what you have going on, aware of your profile, aware of your offer, right? Aware of your free invitation or free gift or whatever the case may be. And they give you immediate traffic back to your page, back to the links, back to your trigger word if you have a like a mini chat or some type of trigger word set up. And sometimes it's free, but more times than not, you have to pay something, right? And it can be a couple of dollars, like 20, 30, 50, $100, or it can be in some cases a 4-figure investment, $4,000 or so, for pages that got a really engaged audience that's really tapped in and they got a really big reach.
Okay. So when you're negotiating with host of a shout out page, should you ask for 1 shout out, 2 shout outs, 3 shout outs? And is there a particular time that would be better?
Yeah, so I would say probably always in the morning or overnight. Those are
Okay.
probably the best times because if you do in the morning, you're gonna be the first post. If you do overnight, your post will probably be up the longest. But you can
Okay.
always ask them, what's your hot time? What's the best time to post? Because they know, they'll let you know.
Okay.
Um, and then there was another question you asked me too with that.
Oh, with the shout out, should you post it 1, 2, or 3
Oh,
times? Have them
yeah,
post
yeah,
it
yeah.
multiple times?
So, oh yeah, you asked me about a deal. So, if you want a deal for shoutouts, I would definitely buy a bulk of shoutouts.
Okay.
So 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. If you buy a bulk of them, you'll definitely get a discount. Because like
And
if you just buy 1 or 2, you're definitely gonna pay whatever the retail price is.
okay. So let's say I wanted to get some shout outs for people to join my masterclass or my challenge. Would I go do a research on who shares my target audience and then pitch them in the DMs and say, "Hey, can you do a shout out? Can I pay you money to do a shout out?" Is that how it works?
Yeah, 100%. Or you could come to me and then we could do it for you because we got the list. But yeah, essentially.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. So tell us about what is your call to action? How can we continue this journey with you, working with you, learning from you?
Yeah, 100%. So I have a 5-day challenge coming up about how to grow your audience, how to monetize that audience, how to leverage that audience. And it's completely online. And I'm gonna bring a couple of friends with me to do that. All you need to do is go to audiencegrowthchallenge.com. Audiencegrowthchallenge.com. So if you go to audiencegrowthchallenge.com, we have the 297 ticket, or we also got a $97 ticket for those that kind of just want to see what's going on. But those that know that they need an audience, they need growth, they need exposure, they want to expedite their experience, I would definitely grab the 297 option.
For sure. And that, do they get to ask you questions in that option? Is there?
Yep. 297,
Okay.
you can ask me questions. We got a pre and post party, so you can come to that. You get access to the guests, obviously, and then well, we basically in the pre and post party, we give you information that might be a little bit more tailored or custom to what you currently have going on, so you can kind of ask us anything that you want.
That's amazing. I love it. Well, you bring so much value, Brendan, and you give value, but you also have a huge heart to serve and help people win, and you have a gift. So thank you so much for you and your heart to serve. And everybody go to Audience Growth Challenge. Is that right? Audiencegrowthchallenge.com. And when
Yep.
is this challenge? Do you do it monthly?
Yeah. So right now it's bi-monthly. So depending on when you're watching this, it could be next or it could be coming up. But
Okay.
the one right now is in April,
Okay.
April 15th to the 19th. So if you're watching this before then, you're gonna be in that one. If you're watching this after that, then you can still go to the link. You'll just sign up for the one that's gonna be relevant to whatever time frame you're watching this podcast.
Audience is everything. You got to continuously grow your audience in order to grow your income. All right. Any final last words before we wrap it up?
All I want to do is encourage people to focus on having an offer, focus on getting an offer out as fast as possible and as consistent as possible, and then focus on growing your audience. So I think if you can do those 3 things, you'll be in good shape.
Offer fast
And
audience.
audience, yep.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. You guys enjoy this video. Be sure to comment below. Where can we follow you? Because you have great social media content.
Thank you so much. You can follow me at it's Brendan Boyd, BrendanBoyd. I cannot
It's
wait to connect
Brendan.
with you guys.
It's
Yep.
Brendan Boyd.
Yep.
And that's everywhere.
That's everywhere, all platforms.
Great. All right. Well, we will follow you there. Thank you for showing up and serving, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye.